Today I'm talking to Sasja Beslik. Sasja is probably the most influential man when it comes to sustainable finance. He set up Sweden's most accomplished sustainable investment fund for Nordea in 2011 and has since gathered a reputation as the go-to man for evaluating sustainable investments. Hi, Sasja.
Hi, and thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
When I look at your social accounts, one question that I keep asking myself is, are you an angry man?
No, I'm not. And I used to get lately. I'm getting these questions from various people in the context that I have. No, I'm not. I'm more getting frustrated and disappointed with the fact that not much is really happening in the
Yeah,
space. You have to take into account that I've been working with this for 20 years. So,
yeah.
I've been hearing the stories for a very, very long time. So I'm getting a bit of a tired of it.
Fully understand. Today, I want to actually jump a bit into your background and actually what got you into the whole field of sustainable finance. Also, a bit of your personal background and jump a bit into the future because, of course, that's like you were riding the wave really early. And as a matter of fact, I actually saw that in 2018. There's a Wired article about you that says in 2018 that you were one of the first bigger accounts on Twitter that retweeted the photo of your country women, Greta Thunberg's
Yes,
strike.
yes.
And they pretty much imply in that article that your tweet led to Greta's movement gaining traction. So how much credit do you give yourself for that?
No, 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 no. I think Greta is good enough and large and global enough to reach out with the messages that she has, and I was just one of the people who saw that very early on. So I'm glad that I could help.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Sasha, I want to start a bit with your background story. That's okay with you
Of
because I
course.
find it's very much connected also to the person you are today and the way you kind of see sustainable finance because you're actually a war refugee, right? So
Yes,
so in the Bosnian War, and I said you fled. And then apparently also got almost executed along the way, which was
yes.
kind of an interesting side note in that. And then eventually made it to Sweden. How much impact did that experience have on your later career?
I think the experiences during the war made me maybe prioritize things that are a bit more real, very sort of a both feet on the ground. Understanding what it means to when people make decisions for others and for themselves. I think it made me appreciate life in a completely different way, but it also made me a bit more um, not a fearless, but more like, okay, I've been given a second chance,
Yeah,
and I want to use that for benefit, not only financial, economic, egoistic benefit on myself. I want to do something that can make life better for other people.
yeah,
So that was, I mean, it is in many ways has impacted the way how I reason and also how I think about many of these things. Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And after you fled, so you went to Sweden, and then you eventually studied journalism and economics.
Yes.
And eventually you started working as a journalist, actually in Warsaw with the
Yes.
Red Cross. So the journalistic aspect, I get that, of course, having that kind of humanistic background. But where did the interest for economics come from?
Yeah. It came very quickly, after after I sort of arrived in Sweden and started understanding how the market economies, societies were organized, because I grew up in a more of a social, quasi-social type of the economy,
Yeah,
which was more state governed and state control. And also very quickly understanding that interlink between the economy and the changes in society. So for me, very early on, I understood that, the understanding the economics is actually understanding how modern market-led economies are functioning.
yeah,
And journalism was more of a, I would call it more as a therapy session, because I went to
yeah,
work as a war correspondent in many different places. So it was a more of a way for me to work around some of the, experiences I had during the war. And it was very useful because I've learned early on that it's all about people. It's all about
yeah,
connecting people, and it's all about understanding, what drives people. Yeah,
yeah. And also about being in the field, because I mean that experience that you had. Yeah,
yeah, and I can tell you, I mean, this is something that I've used for the last 20 years in the financial industry, and this approach that I have, it's a bit different from what most of the, sustainable ESG analysts and people would
Yeah,
do,
yeah,
is that I would go out into the field and actually meet companies, meet people affected, go to the ground,
yeah,
spend time with them, because that will give me a completely different insight when than reading the ESG reports,
yeah,
stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So you just mentioned that the journalism was kind of your vacation almost, your vacation off from the real world, which is, to be honest, a bit ironic saying that you covered war crimes in your journalistic career. But um, you actually then moved into the banking industry. So we just covered your background, but that move eventually led you to join Nordea, right? So tell me about the time you made that switch from being a journalist to moving into the banking industry.
I mean, look, just a small correction. I said it was more like a therapy for me. It was
Yeah,
not. It was not walk in a park to go to these different
yeah,
places and report from
yeah,
different conflicts. But after some time, I got kids very early, and I realized that my exposure in these different areas, it's probably not going to be good for either me or my family.
yeah,
So I decided to. I was offered a job for very strangely. I got a job offer from one of the biggest oil companies in the world, British Petroleum, to start working for them
yeah,
as the you know head of social impact assessment for one of the biggest pipelines at the time, Tbilisi
mm,
Baku Ceyhan BTC pipeline, and I spent a year and a half in Georgia and Azerbaijan and parts of Turkey
yeah,
in the field, in the villages, talking to villagers, negotiating
yeah,
about the impacts they had. And then eventually I got the job offer to work for, at the time, the first retail ethical investor in the Nordics called Banco Funds, which was owned by ABN AMRO Asset Management.
yeah,
And I worked as a head of ethical analysis and for a couple of years. And then I was seconded to ABN AMRO in Amsterdam, and I worked as a global head of engagements. And then
yeah.
2009, I joined Nordea, and I was the first person hired basically on a fairly senior level to set up and develop all the work that was related to ESG. So funds, product analysis, models, hire people, build up the teams, all of that.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, let's dive a bit into that because I mean you started to complement investments with information on ESG related topics. I know back then, 2009, 2010, like it sounds so obvious, but back then nobody was talking about that stuff, right? I mean,
No,
obviously
no.
we had known about that. It's important for a long time, but nobody was talking about it. Why did it actually interest you so much to jump specifically into ESG?
I mean, look, the shift from working with the social issue and environmental issues in the field in Georgia and Azerbaijan, and then I was in a
Yeah,
couple of projects for World Bank between the jobs in Zambia, in Nigeria, in Angola. It made me understand that when working on these projects, you understand that the economic and financial players actually set the rules, and if you
mm,
sort of manage to change and improve the rules, you can actually accomplish many of these things faster.
yeah,
So
yeah,
the shift from the field into ethical investments and then to ESG was not that far. What is different is that from the outset when I started, it was more about not investing in tobacco, alcohol, weapons, and stuff like that.
yeah,
But it then very gradually shifted into the fact that externalities, I mean, ES and G issues that companies generate, in their
yeah,
business was having a financial impact. And that was the big shift. That was the change. So when I start doing this back in, eight, nine, it was very virgin space. We were called hippies, and this was not, something that financial industry will ever work with, or it will be a niche and so on. And
yeah,
but now when you look at that, you see the entire world is working with that. So I think that niche has expanded into being something very big.
yeah, yeah. I'm not sure if you've seen the movie Thank You for Smoking.
I unfortunately have not seen that one. No.
Yeah, you might have heard about it. So the plot is kind of there's this group of lobbyists. And I think it's a tobacco lobbyist, a pharma lobbyist, and I think a nuclear lobbyist.
Okay.
And they're kind of just meeting up in this bar every week, and they're kind of talking about how they're messing up society quite a bit, and they're just raking in cash. And the whole plot of the movie, sorry to spoil it a bit, but is that um, suddenly the kids of one of the I think of the tobacco lobbyists, the kids started to get quite a significant influence on him because he's kind of thinking, okay, that's the future. And I think his daughter starts smoking or something like that, and it's
Yeah.
like, okay, let me look at it. Your kids must be like, I guess, like 10-ish now.
No, my kids are big. I got the kids very early on. So I got my
Yeah.
first kid 95, second
Oh wow.
98, and 2000. So my kids are ages 26 to 21. So I
Yeah.
don't have small kids anymore. No.
Of course, yeah. I mean, of course, you're moving from away from being a war journalist into the banking sector. You just attributed that also to your kids.
Yeah.
Um, the environmental aspect, that's you didn't really attribute that to your kids, which I find interesting. So, like looking back at it, many people when they move into environmental causes or becoming environmental activists, not to call you an activist
No, no,
per
no. I
se.
understand what you mean. I
Yeah,
understand what you mean.
yeah. But so many people like they obviously attribute it to their kids. So how much does it mean to you, or do you talk to your kids about that topic?
Oh, yes. I mean, over the years, they've understood what I'm trying to do. And we have a very open, and I would say sometimes very dynamic discussion about what needs to be done. My kids have chosen another uh, professions. Although my middle son is more towards he's a journalist, but the rest is trying to do what they find interesting and important for them.
Yeah,
What I've tried to learn my kids is to see this as a systemic issue, not as a symbolic
yeah,
issue. That's a very important thing for me because going around and scaring people with no-nos instead of trying to see how we can improve things on a systemic level is something that I've
yeah.
been, trying to preach for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's actually a shift because I'm born '91, so I'm like a bit older than your oldest kid, but that's also a shift that I've really seen happen in the last, let's say, 10 years. So, about 10 years ago, I went vegan. I started to like really think about sustainability, not flying anymore. The Fluchtscham, and
Yeah,
I'm also like
yeah.
a Swedish thing, right? Um,
Flygscam,
Flugskam,
flygscam.
you call it,
Yeah,
exactly, flight shaming and all these kind of topics, right? So I was a big part of me, and I was really always talking about, from a liberal perspective, about the almost libertarian perspective about the
yeah.
individuum's responsibility for society and how everything you buy in the supermarket has an influence. And I still believe that, but at the same time, working more in the financial field, you really notice that the systemic issues are really the topic behind it. And I think that's also why many more people that are coming traditionally from ESG background are moving into finance, right? Because that's where things happen.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, you call it the money tree.
Yes, 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 I did. I call it a money tree because it is a systemic issue. As you said, I mean, there are various ways into the ESG world, but I think if you really want to make effort and if you want to make impact, the financial toolbox is the best one because it's global, it's 24/7, it reaches all parts of the world that we are operating in. And, if we can change the financial toolbox, if we can use it in another way, it could have effect
Yeah,
that is, far reaching.
yeah, absolutely. When you implemented that at Nordea, so the first, I call it the first sustainable investment. You probably weren't the first, but the first
Yeah.
kind of one that was award winning
Yeah.
in a way. I suppose not everyone agreed with that shift,
Oh
right?
goodness, no, no, no. You have to bear in mind that this is, I think, something that many people working in the ESG industry still experience.
Yeah,
You still have to fight uphill. I mean, I had a lot of internal fights, a lot of pushbacks, a lot of people that were really thinking that this is just something that we're doing because we want to please with parts of the market.
yeah,
It was not for everybody, so it was a lot of pushback. But then eventually, when you start delivering results, which we did, then the perspective changes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But tell me about that pushback a bit more. Was it more within the company or
No, it was
industry?
it was mostly. I mean, look, most of us working in the ESG industry in the financial space, we I think most of us experienced this tremendous pushback internally. Our
Yeah,
biggest challenges are not external; they are
yeah,
most of the time internal, because you have different agendas, you have different priorities, you have different powers in the
yeah,
organizations, and for me, it was continuous fight between. Why do we need to do this for all of our products? Why can't we
mm,
just have a couple of them? Why why does this need to have a priority? What is
yeah,
this with climate footprint of the funds? Why do we need that? Clients don't want that.
yeah,
All of these kind of things that you have to bridge, step by step. So I'm a very persistent person. So I rarely, I never give up. So I was working these 10 years and taking the organization with me and building the capacity. And at the time, I think when I left, that was a oiled machinery that is actually
Yeah.
still one of the leading in the European context. So it was really interesting journey.
Yeah. And as a direct result of your work, and I actually want to dive into the framework that you used later a bit. But as a direct result of your work, you actually, or not, or you actually pulled out of a couple of quite significant investments. I think, especially Airbus and
Yeah.
Lockheed Martin, and a couple of other big ones, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, there are two angles to it. Most of the what you usually see, what media picks up, are the things when we do a big sort of walkouts from
Yeah.
investments. But some of my biggest achievements are actually construction of some of these products to identifying companies that are really good. So you have both angles in this. You
Yeah.
have the one angle which is a negative, and I some of the things that I did in, for instance, in India, I discovered a huge pharmaceutical pollution of the water streams in two Indian states with millions
Yeah.
and millions of people living. Then I had to spend some time in prison, and then I managed to get these
As you
companies,
do. Yeah.
yeah, pharmaceutical companies, to actually do something. So, I mean, the pullouts of the companies, the walkouts from the holdings, it's not an easy thing,
Yeah.
but it was, in the Nordic region when you somehow when you have investment policy and when you have people with you on it, then it's easy to sort of execute on because people are with you.
Yeah.
And of course, that has stirred up a lot of questions and a lot of competition. Was looking at it, thinking, well, what the hell are we doing? But on the other hand, we got a lot of business for it because many clients were coming to us saying that you guys are really sort of doing this properly and you're
Mm.
believing in it and you are delivering on it. So it's very
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the impact on the bank, but what was the impact on your career? Because it kind of reads like that really kickstarted everything for you.
No, I think the kickstart for my career was this job that I got in the beginning of Nordea when I started working for Nordea to construct these, construct the processes to do actually develop the analysis model, write the first ESG
Yeah.
handbook for investments, all of these things. But then, of course, my stubbornness in terms of that, I'm not afraid of saying what I think.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid of stepping up and saying, this is what I like and this is what I don't like. It's linked to my personality. And I think that was very, that served me a lot, but it also punished me a lot in my career. So if I could keep my tongue and my mouth shut from time to time, I would probably gain more things, but it's just a part of my personality. I like to say what I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So sustainability is often perceived as needing to be holistic. I also know from my own experience with things like life cycle assessments
Yeah.
that it's not always black and white, right? You can analyze something one way and then you can shift the analysis a bit and then suddenly it's
Yeah.
something else. Yeah. But what makes an investment sustainable, or what is your framework for what makes an investment sustainable?
I mean, investment is sustainable when it leads to tangible, what I mean by that, tangible material improvements for people that are using the product or service or for the nature in a positive way. It's not having adverse negative impact on the nature. So you have this, no harm principle, the carbon footprint of the product, life cycle perspective of the product in terms of the
Mm,
reuse and where how product can be mended over time and all of these things. But unfortunately, if you look at it from a holistic perspective, there are very few truly sustainable products out there because the way how we price externalities is not really reflected in the way how we develop
mhm.
products.
Yeah.
So it is, most of the products that we have, even those that are called sustainable, are to a certain extent there's a discount in them
Yeah.
because we sort of we want them to be sustainable and we
Yeah.
do a lot of things. But in practice, 70% of the energy in the world is coming still from the fossil industry
Yeah.
and externalities are not accounted for. So I think my definition for you, what is sustainable product? I think that going back to that, it is a product that serves, people that are using the product, but also has a minimal impact on the environment.
Mm.
That's how I would define it.
Okay. And there's no kind of number you would put on it. It's really like looking at it holistically.
Yeah, it's difficult to give you a number, but because as I told you, the externalities are not priced in. So right now
Yeah.
we are still operating sustainability in the same vacuum as we operate our economic system. Externalities are taken away. Now,
Yeah.
what you have seen over the last 20 years, and now with the climate movement and everything,
Yeah.
is that we have taken one externality, which is the CO2 emission, and we're trying to push it into the vacuum room,
Yeah.
into the sort of a chamber where the economic system is. But you can also see how much resistance that's created,
Yeah.
because it is shifting the sort of a inside the vacuum
Yeah.
sort of a room. It's shifting the air a bit, so it's everybody wants to sort of have it their own way.
Yeah.
So that will be my response to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose you're referring a bit to let's say carbon offset licenses and these kind of little plays, right?
Yes, offset, but also you know, what is also interesting is that many companies are, for instance, can account for a positive impact CO2 emissions that are generated by product X. But there is also downside to the product, how the product has been transported, produced, or how much
Yeah.
energy has been used for that. So you have to net this out. And right now we don't have a net numbers. We have just gross
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah.
So that's something that development will, I mean, in the next 5 years, you'll see more of a, what I call them, the net climate funds, that where you can actually see that
Yeah.
how much a company's netting, on one side and how much
Yeah.
they're saving on another side.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, there's when we talk about these externalities for a second, of course, there are different methodologies right now that are kind of in the narrative about how we can fix that. The EU is currently working on the CSRD, so the new Corporate
Yeah,
Sustainability kind of Reporting Directive. Of course, carbon tax is a big topic that's being thrown around all over the place, and that's all that different cap and trade systems and all these kind of topics
yeah,
that nobody's really sure like how can we implement it on a European level, for example, without having having a disadvantage. Yeah, another topic that's being thrown around in this context. Is next to it the carbon tax and CSRD are also yeah other kind of sustainable ETFs, for instance, that kind of are supposed to trickle down at some point. Um, what are these? What are the biggest kind of levers that we have on a political scale actually to work with these externalities?
I think, when you talk about these things, about carbon tax, about these different types of offsetting things, it's actually doing we should, it's addressing the marginal things in the economic system, because it's
Yeah,
it's addressing the consequences, not the sort of the causes. And I think what could be done, that discussion has been going on in the European Union, is to address how do we change the responsibility that is stipulated in the corporate charters of the companies.
yeah,
Because right now the corporate charters in Germany or in Sweden or in London or in US are basically written in the same way. So they actually stipulate how a company operates and what the company is responsible for.
yeah,
And and if you don't have a corporate charters where it's that are defined in a way that the board of the directors and the CEO have responsibility for impacts caused by company on
yeah,
planet and people, uh, then everything else becomes, it's very marginal. So it's basically at the will of the companies, depending on the market, depending
yeah,
on the maturity stage. So that's one thing that I think we could do, and that's where the politicians really could make a big difference if they do that,
yeah,
and if they put their act together. The second is, of course, the one that we've been, in the financial industry, we've been screaming for that for the last 10 years. That's the price of carbon. So, with the pricing system, with the agreed sort of a level playing field for the price, you get completely different ballgame, because then
yeah,
within a month we can integrate, price into our DCF models, discounting cash flow models,
yeah,
and then it's done. It's
yeah,
over. It's basically, then we know this company is not going to make it. This one is going to make it, and this is how it works. But we are not there, and that's the challenge that we have. So I think,
yeah,
starting with the underlying systems and then going back to the education. I mean, look, we are examining, millions of economists every year, financial analysts, and they are all basically learning the old system.
yeah,
They are not reading anything about how to price externalities.
yeah,
So this is also one of the things politicians through the national legislation could change the educational modules, because it will be easier to have these people educated from beginning about this.
yeah, yeah. I mean, but when externalities are so difficult to put your finger on, I mean, at the end of the day, you still make decisions based on sustainability, right? For
Yeah.
your funds. But how do you actually then, yeah, how do you compare different investments. I mean, you have to make a decision at some point. Nothing is sustainable, as Patagonia says, right? So do you just choose the lesser evil?
I think the it's in the you have a absolute and relative sort of approach. So on the absolute level, if you look at the companies, there is a lot of improvements for all of them. But then if
Yeah,
you put all the absolutes into a relative box, you get the complete. Then you compare them with each other in
yeah,
each sector. So what you basically try to do, as you said, is within a sector you try to invest in companies that have most what I call sustainability potential,
yeah,
most leverage in their own sort of operations or through their products. So that would probably be the most honest answer is that yes, you're trying to change, you're trying to choose the less, less bad companies. But actually, if you look at it from another perspective, you're trying to identify companies that when they improve their business operations, their products could give you a financial leverage.
yeah, yeah,
So that's basically how it works. And then of course, what you do is that nowadays you have a lot of avoidance of coal and oil, and now gas is green and nuclear is green, so you will
What
see
do you
a lot
describe that?
of yeah.
Yeah,
And right, I just read a report on the US market where the American oil and gas companies are certifying gas as green from a perspective of being responsibly extracted. So it's very, we are living in a very, very strange sort of a time in terms of, you
yeah.
know, responsible gas because it's extracted in a responsible way, and people sort of see that as a
Mm,
certificate that it's good. So, you know, uh, everything is possible and everything is impossible. So yeah,
yeah. Let's leave it at that. Exactly. Sasha, one of the main hypothesis you state in your book, The Money Tree, is that sustainable investments are long term more successful.
yeah.
Now, I don't see my sustainable ETFs outperform the S&P 500 right now.
I
Why is
don't-
that?
I think it depends, and the thing is, there is a cave out in that one which says, I think they do, but depends how they are done. And I think one thing is certain is that if they are truly, if these ESG investments, sustainable investments, are done in a really good way, the result of these investments will over time lead not only to improve companies managing better their people, supply
Yeah,
chains, all of that, but it will also create stability for these companies to provide better returns. Now, uh, everything depends how it's done. What I think is very dangerous is to look as you do and many others, and I do it as well. I'm looking at the performance of ESG funds basically every single day to see that some of these funds that are flagged as ESG, because they are mirroring those different markets or different indices are uh, really in a sense not sustainable, because they don't have that objective. And that leads us into discussion about Article 8 and 9 and SFTR and EU and
yeah,
all of that.
yeah,
So the only, you know, within the Article 9 universe of products that you will have on the market today, maybe fraction 10% is really interesting from investment point of view
yeah,
because most of it is marketing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Are you more of a revolutionist or an evolutionist?
I'm somewhere in between, to be honest. I think the evolution, going back, I mean, if I go back 20 years and see where we are today, I mean, it's great. Have we moved the needle too much? Not really. Do we need a kick sort of at the start in terms of the revolution in the way how the clients just basically say, stop doing these things, allocate capital in another way?
Mhm.
Yes. So I'm somewhere in between. And that is also the reason why I'm a bit frustrated in a way that the markets are really not. There's a lot of talk, a lot of hot air. There are a lot of words out there,
Mhm.
and I think we
Blah
are,
blah blah. Mm.
yeah, 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 and we are fooling ourselves a bit because it's not going to help us because if we don't deliver ESG sustainable improvements through the investments, the people will look at us in 5 years' time and say, "Okay, guys, you're going to lose all the credibility you have
Yeah,
because it's not really what you said it should be."
yeah, yeah. So let's say we have our audience is mostly finance professionals, M&A professionals specifically, and they often make, of course, investment decisions. Now, few of them are really deep ESG experts. Now, at the same time, I know many of them, especially the younger generation, want to look at that topic more closely. Now, if someone's not an expert on the topic and has the time to do field trips to Kenya and into the Congo, how can they start to maybe implement a little bit of ESG related topics into their investments?
Yeah, I think it depends. Again, it depends on the sector and the company and how what's your style. If you're active or passive, if you like quant or if you like more actively managed sort of a hands-on portfolios. But what I think is very important is that when you start looking at the company on any level for evaluation on ESG side, um, search for results. Search for
Yeah.
word. Just look at the results. So, company has policies, principles, all the nice pictures, children laughing, we are happy. You know, uh, environmental responsibility, blue skies, all of these things, but actually try to figure out how concrete are the results. Look at the results over time. And I used to look at 3 years back. When I analyze company, I don't look at 2020. I look at 2018 and 19 and 20 to get the sense of how much the company has moved over time, and also what kind of results are they disclosing over time. But that gives you a bit of a sense where they're going.
Yeah.
Um, and also, I think ask questions. It's like the companies are not most European companies, American companies different. It's a bit different ballgame because you
Yeah.
email to a inbox somewhere, and then maybe
Yeah.
somebody will answer. European companies are actually quite good responding.
Yeah.
So if it's European market you're looking at, just ask questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I second that for sure. You rightfully are concerned that we're moving so slow when it comes to ESG. And I think that's the big frustration that especially the younger generation is really feeling already. And that we can, of course, also feel the impact of already. If I look at the research when it comes to not climate science and what the social aspect of it, a notion that has been coming up more often lately is that it's not really about climate denial, but more about climate obstruction.
Yeah.
So why are we moving so slow? What's the blocker?
It's and going back to your evolutionary, revolutionary sort of aspect, you have to understand, and this is something that every time in the societies, in these cycles that we go through, when you are moving from one, basically the system that you operate is not optimal anymore, it needs to change. There's of course resistance in the system because the change may incur that the different power structures will look differently. So,
Yeah,
and it's sort of an embedded resistance in it. I think the obstruction is not necessarily always because we don't like the climate or we don't think it's a climate change. Obstruction is, yes, we know it's a climate change, but can we afford to change?
yeah,
You understand what I mean?
yeah,
So it's sort of a deeper the reason is much deeper than just I think most of the people understand that, you know, climate emergency we are facing. Climate change will have tremendous impact, but people usually think it's not going to hit me
yeah,
because I'm going to be fine. Maybe my neighbor, but I'm going to, make it.
yeah,
So I think we are in a space where you can. It's almost like we polishing, stairs on Titanic, and we think it's fine because it looks good, and we got the new polish and all of that. But in the same time, I think there is a big difference in perception on the impact in Western world, like where we are in Northern
yeah,
Europe, and let's say Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, China, parts of Africa, where the poor people will be affected by this alone. And this is another angle that we didn't touch upon, which I think it's relevant to take up in this ESG discussion. ESG toolbox in the financial industry has a purpose, and purpose is to make things better. It's not to make things look better.
yeah,
It's to actually make things better, to improve things. That's the purpose. Otherwise, there's no place there.
yeah, yeah. Touching upon the Bangladesh topic, so following your socials, you seem to have a very, I mean, obviously you're Swedish, but you also seem to have a very specific relationship with H&M.
Oh, yes. Thank you for taking that one up. I do. And I give you a story, actually. Story not told many times, but back in 2010, I started a group of family of funds for Nordea called Stars. And these are one of the most successful ESG funds today on the market, I think globally in some aspects. And I gave H&M a benefit of a doubt. So I started investing in them based on ESG, based on the promises and almost like a roadmap that provided me. Years later, I evaluated these things and I've got more and more depressed and more frustrated and more irritated because these improvements were actually not happening. And the company was completely sort of ignoring the fact that they are invested, at least from our perspective, from sort of an from my ESG view. And in the Sweden at the time when I did this, it was almost like I gave them a stamp of approval, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
So when this kind of a ethical profile that I was gave them a stamp of approval, they could sort of go on and do their thing.
Yeah.
And basically, our sort of a dialogue has been going on since 2010. So now it's about 12 years now, um, talking about the same things, and I don't see any improvements. And
Yeah.
the fact is that the business model of fast fashion is not sustainable, will never be sustainable. And I don't
Yeah.
have a problem with the companies coming to us saying that, look, we run a fast fashion business. We know it's not sustainable. We do it for the shareholders and we want to make money. I don't have a problem with that. But
Yeah.
if you come to me and said, yes, we are fast fashion, but we also very sustainable and we are doing
Yeah.
all of these things, and they're actually not true.
Yeah.
It's sort of it doesn't fit in, it
Yeah.
doesn't look good. And this is another thing that it's relevant from ESG perspective. There are some companies in the world, so huge companies. H&M is one of them,
Yeah.
where you actually cannot find anybody, any body or organization or firm that can truly evaluate how these companies are sustainable or not,
Yeah.
because they are so huge and there are so many parameters you have to take into account. So you basically rely on their self-reporting, and if you do that, everything is fine. We have
Yeah.
already reached all the Paris targets, and we can
Of
just relax.
course.
Yeah,
Those reports always look amazing, eh? Like
yeah,
looking
yeah,
like I compare sustainability reports, and I really actually like. I find that the American tech companies, that's really where almost state of the art when it comes to sustainability reporting. I find if I look at like Apple and Tesla, like
yeah,
that's I mean because they know that everyone talks about these kind of cobalt issues and
yeah,
everything, right? So they feel like they're under scrutiny, but the fashion companies haven't really lived up to that yet. I must say. I mean, okay, I must say like supply chain transparency, especially on the social side. Of course, it's hard to track than just like where do my raw materials come from. But come on, you're $1 billion companies, you should be able to do that.
yeah, yeah. Of course, of
Yeah,
course,
yeah,
of
yeah.
course.
What's your feeling that I mean, H&M, of course, huge company, but at the same time, we also see ultra fast fashion companies pop out of the ground left, right. So I think Shine
Yeah,
is like a big one right now that's even faster, and I mean, it's just insane looking at it from a sustainability. Like, what's your
yeah.
take on that?
No, but I think you will see it's called in Swedish art, separate arts of these,
Yeah,
crazy type of business models that are popping up that are super fast in terms of the fast fashion and all of that. But the environmental impact of these companies is
yeah,
just enormous. And it's
yeah,
just a resource, the depletion of the resources that is mind blowing. And this is
yeah,
what comes, I mean, this is also what and this goes back to the earlier discussion you and I had on the economic model versus, how do we operate that? And then what is the sustainability, true sustainable financial economic model? They are not necessarily compatible. So we are trying to put, 45 size foot into a 41 size shoe. And it's not always easy.
yeah, yeah. So naturally, given your background, it's easy at parties, at dinners, easy to have always have depressed discussions. And I'm sure you're sick of it by now, but what do you talk about when people ask you about your job and you don't want to ruin the atmosphere?
No, I just say I'm a plumber. If I don't know them. No, but if they ask me about my job, I would rather not talk about that. I'll talk about, we can talk about football. Football is a fantastic thing to talk about. Both
Okay.
German and English football and French football and Italian football is always a nice discussion and a conversation. And we are sometimes you can use a completely different parts of the reality to get to people to understand
Yeah.
that climate change and work in the financial industry is like, it's like a football. It's like a
Yeah.
boxing match. You go up and you box
Yeah.
every day and you get beaten basically last 10, 15 years, but you still go up and fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not depressing. Look, I think it's people are. I'm not going around. I'm not depressed, but I can, being angry and disappointment and frustrated from time to time because things are not moving. It's actually good emotional thing, but I'm not feeling depressed because I think we can make it. I think we can make a difference, and people working in the companies are people. They are
Yeah.
human beings. They understand and feel, and they can change. But I think it's also about the fact that we need to keep telling you know, reminding people what's important, and that's probably a deeper discussion.
Yeah. I want to end this conversation on a positive note. What gives you hope?
Young people, definitely. It's not only because I have children in that age, but even younger than they are. I think the young people with their uncompromising belief in future and their place in the future. I think that's really really good. I think I'm positive on a lot of technology development side that people are seeing and trying to sort of find the solutions. I'm seeing positive things in developing countries that are really struggling and trying to make that shift in a sustainable way. So there's a lot of positive things in the world, but I think on a systemic level, we need to keep the pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. Sasha, your book, The Money Tree, is available on Amazon and
Yes.
ideally also in your local
Yeah,
bookshop.
yeah, yeah. It is. It's you can buy it. You can order it on Amazon. And I have written a book before this in actually all in Swedish, but we had a very good experience with the book. Book has been best selling on Amazon for a number of weeks in the U.S. It seems to be a great interest. So and we like it's not complicated. It's very easy to read. So I hope
Yeah.
people find it interesting.
Sasha, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, and I hope we'll talk again in 2 years' time, and I tell you all the good things that have happened.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope
Thank
so.
you.
Thanks, Sasha. Thank you for joining us in the Open Eye Seat. If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe to our show wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also leave a review, that really helps, and connect with us for feedback on fintalent.io. See you next time.